Hello and welcome to Manny Biel. And first of all, I would just remind you that it seems that my Discord server is slowly starting to build some traction. There's a few of you very active subscribers who have ventured into the Discord server. There should be a link down below here, and if there isn't, it's because I forgot to put it there, and it might be in one of the recent videos before this one, right? So you're more than welcome to. It's open for anybody. There's nothing. It's not for a select group or anything like that. It's just whatever you fancy to talk about. Of course, mostly with primarily with a philosophical angle, but whatever you can find people with a like mind and with interest in discussing various things. Of course, I've attracted a few who's also critical of Stefan Molyneux, not least because I've done all these deconstructions of 3 of his philosophy books, and there are a lot of critics of Stefan Molyneux, and there's a certain channel on the board which is actually it's called Stefan Molyneux. So if you want to come around and discuss Stefan Molyneux and give us or give everyone your opinion, well, you're welcome to stop by. So I just wanted to. I've been thinking for a while that, even though I have no more than a couple of hundred subscribers on YouTube, it's nice to have some kind of forum or something where you can sort of elaborate on things and exchange ideas and thoughts and deeper explanations and so on. I'm not interested in making a biggie out of it, right? It's just, well, Discord is free to use, and as far as I'm concerned, right? And it is established, and there already have a few dudes stopping by every other day. So it's I think we might be able to establish something where you can go and have if you are using Discords already, well, it's no biggie to just add my server to your list of servers. So you're free to join, so no worries. One thing speaking of Stefan Molyneux, one thing I noticed was a recent video podcast he made where he discusses how to fall in love and such, and I also mentioned it on the board, and I'm just curious about what the hell he's doing, right? Because it seems like he's just whatever he fancies in the moment, that's what he's going to shout, right? Because what he used to say is that love is the involuntary response to virtue, right? So it's if another person is virtuous, you might end up starting loving them. Now, it's okay. I mean, I'm not going to, I haven't done any sort of deep analysis about what love might actually, how to approach the idea of love, right? And the emotion of love. So it's a tricky one, right? And another thing with that, which is a problem with Stefan Molyneux, he hasn't actually defined what virtue is and how does it relate to ethics or morality, right? And another thing is that he's very fond of Aristotle, and Aristotle has what has become known as virtue ethics, which is basically more or less something like if you have a balanced life, you're not very shy. You're not a daredevil either. You're sort of in the middle. Sometimes you can be bold. Sometimes you're more, introvert. So it's sort of balanced life. That's virtuous. And if you approach that balanced life, you will be moral. So it's like it's an approach that Aristotle apparently took. I haven't delved too much into Aristotle, to be honest, but that's my sort of low down and dirty understanding of Aristotle's ethics, known as virtue ethics. So it's not completely ridiculous to say that there might be some kind of relation between virtue and ethics, or virtue and morality. And ethics and morality also has to be sort of clarified, in my opinion. So there are actually three things in the realm of, let's say, morality. There's virtue, that ethics and morality, and maybe even principles for that matter, right? While principles might also have no moral content of any kind. But it's like it needs some clarification. It's just a sort of, it's another thing with Stefan Molyneux, is he has these, this is how it is, done, right? So it's when you try to deconstruct it, you need some clarifications, you need some definitions of the terms, right? And what is love really, right? And what is virtue? If you say what is what doesn't mean it's involuntary, and what is a response. So I mean, it's not a hardcore philosophical definition, but it's usually a problem in philosophy that everything drowns in semantics, right? It drowns in, what does that word mean? Well, then I make a definition. Okay, what do those words then mean, right? And then you can keep going, right? And in my opinion, that's where the metaphysical reduction base comes in. At the end, you will end up discussing either your emotions or your sense qualia, right? It will either be, well, I have this feeling, I have this emotion, I have this desire, or it will be something, it has a color, it has a shape, it's something like that, right? So what do you mean? What is love really, right? Because nobody can actually tell you what it is. Even if they say, well, love is, but then you can't show love. It's not empirical, right? Love is not empirical. It might come or arrive in your emotional apparatus when something particular happens in the world, right? Then you might get the emotion. There's something that about that, what is going on, that triggers that particular emotion, which you could potentially refer to as love. But it's not the objects that gives you love, right? It's the recognition of the objects it's the recognition of the concepts that are somehow related to. It's like when you see a spider and a big fat spider, right? One this size, right? You're likely going to have an immediate reaction, right? It's not something you decide. It's just like this. Whenever that concept and in that kind of quality is recognized, you automatically have that emotion or that urge or whatever label we could put on it, right? So in my understanding, concepts are all connected to a emotional apparatus, right? The fighting, fleeing, fucking, and feeding, right? That's a rationalization, but in the end, the rationalization is sometimes based on your direct emotional response. It's like if you need to flee, it's not a bad idea to get a sense of fear or adrenaline kick or whatever it is, right? These things are something that I haven't gone too deep into yet, but I need to in my book, which has been resting for a while. It's like I take it in lumps, where I write and then take a break, and then I go back, and then I find some grammatical errors, or you know, it has to be explained in another way that is more clear, and so on, right? So it's sort of a long chain of iterations. Where was I? I lost my train of thought there. Well, let's get back to the love thing. I'm convinced that at this point, right, and it might change, but at this point, I think there's a certain connection between the experience of people's appearance and their actions that gives you some kind of love, right? And there's also this connection between love and lust, that you can lust for a person, so to say, but that is, so it's complicated, right? And there's all sorts of things in the fray here, right? So it's where's the delineations and so on, right? And you lusting for a person doesn't necessarily mean that you love them, and loving a person obviously doesn't have to mean that you are attracted sexually to them, or you know, desire them, the bodily desire, right? And this borderline is also where, you know, sort of incest problems and so on, because people can delineate this, right? So, but I don't want to go deeper into that, but it's I think it's a big problem in the world, and there's a lot of things that point in that direction, right? Not least the Biden family, man. Are you kidding me? Oh man, right? So the love is it stems from an experience, but it's not the experience that does it. It's your I could say, right? I'm talking for myself. It's also always implicit in what I'm saying, because I'm the only one having particularly my emotions, right? So it's hard to say exactly how it works, because what some person might find virtuous might not necessarily be what somebody else finds virtuous. And no, Stefan Molyneux doesn't say that either. So it doesn't say that it's a particular kind of virtue. It's just sort of a subjective, implicitly a subjective approach to virtue, that if you find something virtuous, you might fall in love with it, right? But love can be sort of, it can be from an obsession to sort of a kind of respect, right? It's sort of a gradient of emotions, right? And maybe there's also, there needs to be some kind of limitations to your letting it rip, so to say, that you don't fall head over heels in love with somebody and marry them over a weekend or something like that, right? Which is sort of these gunshot weddings, or what they're called, right? It doesn't work. It shouldn't happen, right? Don't do that. I mean, it's ridiculous to meet a person and then 3 days later get married to them, right? It doesn't work that way. It's bound to be bound to be a disaster, right? But, and there's also this point that depending on who you are, you can be more or less in control of your emotions, right? And don't let them, and it can be, they can run away with you, so to say, so that you are sort of out of control of your emotions, you could say, right? And I have an idea that people who have that sort of weakness, maybe you could say, tend to retract or lose that love, right? Because they were so, you know, infatuated with this person, when they find out it's just an ordinary person, just like any other person, then they lose actually more of that love than somebody who's more taking small steps at a time, right, and developing something, right? So it's sort of a complicated thing, right? But I'm convinced that there's a connection between. I mean, they say that it's a child that only a mother could love, right? That's an old saying, right? So it's like, I don't, sort of a feral child that is annoying. It's always the parents' fault. That's another thing, right? But some just seem more virtuous than others. You know, a child that, you know, kills frogs by slamming them onto a rock, something like that. It doesn't seem virtuous because it's an action that is not necessary. It's unnecessary to kill things if you're not going to eat it, right? So it's like it's built into in some sense or another into the system of our system, so that we can recognize people we might not want to have anything to do with, right? But that is the contrasted from our need to be in a group that's more or less expressed in personalities, right? The extrovert or the introvert, right? But all people have a need and are dependent somehow or another on other people. So we have this sense of virtue, which is, you're not virtuous, so I'm going to sort of ignore you, or I find you very virtuous, so I'm going to try to be your friend or your partner or whatever, right? So there's a gradient of classification of actions and appearances that categorizes people according to some inner system that you have, whether or not you actually find them sort of good persons or virtuous persons. And it doesn't necessarily have to lead to love, right? But he doesn't say that either. He says it's an involuntary reaction to virtue or response to virtue. He doesn't necessarily say whenever there's virtue you will fall in love. So, and that would also be quite ridiculous, right? So I'm fine with it. I mean, it's significantly fluffy, because it needs to be fluffy, because it's not a straight up science or anything like that, right? But I would like to have some more definitions of, in particular, his idea of what virtue is, right? And then it's when you act morally or ethically, he would probably say, well, then you will ask, what do you mean by ethically, right? And maybe he'll give me an answer there, or he will say, well, you're an idiot, you're an edgelord, you're trying to derail me, or something like that. While I would actually be trying to get to the reduction base. What is this reduction base? And if I can't get to a philosopher's reduction base, in my opinion, I would reject them as a good philosopher. It doesn't mean that particular aspects that they are talking about could be valid, like love is a response to virtue, fine. But the deeper levels of philosophy I'm not going to accept, right? So, those were my thoughts today. As I said, drop in to the Discord server, see if there's guys or gals there ready to answer questions or have a chat with you. And otherwise, I will see you in the next podcast. Bye bye.